Hi, Roudy. Welcome back to the Art of Living Well podcast. We are so excited to bring you back on our show today. We were able to reconnect with you this past October in Orlando at the health summit that we were all at under Dr. Stephen Cabral. And Stephanie and I listened to you speak again, and we just knew that we really wanted to have you on our show again because you have so much to share with the world, and you're a captivating speaker. And so anyway, we love the topic of light, and like, you go deep, and not a lot of people do that, and we really appreciate that so much. So, but before we get started, we would love to know, if you had no constraints today, financial, time, how would you spend your day?
That's an interesting question. I think exactly the same way I'm spending it now. And what would that look like is waking up first thing in the morning, really early, and taking the time to meditate and sit in stillness. And from that point, really taking some time afterwards to awaken my senses and observe the beauty around me. Look at the colors. I love observing the colors at the dawn. It's so magical. It speaks to my soul, and that's a very powerful time for me to tap into inspirations and ideas. So during that time, I like to take it very slowly awakening my senses, and then from that, go to slowly starting some physical exercise to raise my core body temperature up, and that usually aligns with the time when the sun is rising. So essentially, interestingly, from a circadian perspective, that's optimal, because as the sun is rising, also our core body temperature is rising. And one of the ways that we could help that happening is by engaging in physical exercise. For me, that will look like running on the beach or going for a surfing session. And I always like to start slow, awakening the senses slowly, and then increase the intensity. And I often, or 100% of the time, exercise outdoors. I never go to a gym or anything like this. And that's because I like to really harness the power of light and exercise at the same time. And given the tremendous importance of not only getting morning sunlight, but also getting UVA light, which often rises around an hour after sunrise, I like to combine those two steps, which I shared in my presentation, the 7 steps of harnessing the power of light. Step number 2 was to get UVA light, which activate the production of POMC, propiomelaanocortin, and becomes so many different peptides and neurotransmitters that control the way we think, feel, and act. Essentially, it wakes us up. It allows us to have the alertness and the focus to go after what we really want during the day. It increases our dopamine, the hormone that allows us to think outside of the box and to zoom out, and to have the motivation to pursue the things that we want to pursue during a given day. Also, it increases serotonin, it increases alpha MCH, beta MCH, gamma MCH. So there's a ton of different benefits, and I can't imagine myself missing on those benefits just because I want to exercise indoors. So one thing I like to do is combining the two together. And if my exercise session, if I'm surfing, it's usually like an hour and a half. So I get to harness the power of the sun rising, which reset my circadian rhythm and tell my brain that the day is starting. And then an hour after UVA start rising, I also get around like a half an hour to an hour of UVA light during that time. And after that, I'm profoundly passionate about this topic, specifically light. So I would definitely, no matter what my conditions are financially and from a time perspective, I would definitely choose to be in my own space and think about ways I could share this education more with people and inspire more people to be outside, to understand the importance of circadian biology. So I like to work anything between 4 to 7 hours per day, and that's really nothing that is set in stone. I find that some days I could do more work, other days I could do less, and the marker for me for how much work I'm getting done is really, am I connected to the light of my soul? And what this means to me, am I acting from a place of inspiration, or am I in a desperate state? And anytime I'm in a desperate state where I'm so overconsumed by my senses and by the busyness of the world, I have made a commitment to myself to stop no matter what I'm doing, no matter what's happening in the world around me, no matter what the conditions and circumstances are. I have made a very powerful commitment to myself that I would stop and I would sit with myself and kind of push my senses out and invite my souls back in. And that to me means finding stillness once again, so that everything in motion could be distilled down into a center point where I could find clarity. I could reconnect back to what's important and then find direction from that place. So I'm not being swayed by the wind.
Wow.
One, you're only the second person to answer that question with the response that it's what you're already doing now. Like, you are truly not just practicing what you preach, but you are just like living what your soul intended and sharing that with the world. And the only way you can do that, really truly do that, is by being in rhythm with the sun. And again, just going back, everyone should listen to episode 213 to learn more about Roudy's journey, because it's really powerful what you share and the impact that natural sunlight and exposure and your circadian rhythm has had on your overall health. But that was so beautiful how you just described it. I think everyone right now is going to want to
well, and I love that you said that if you're feeling out of alignment, you stop everything to get yourself back into alignment, because if everybody in the world did that, you would have such a different world, right? Because so many people are walking around you didn't say out of alignment. I can't remember what your exact words were, but that was the gist
out
of
it. Body. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do notice that oftentimes when I'm working with my team and a certain obstacle arises in our working environment that throws us off, one of the first things that I like to do is, instead of reacting right away to that obstacle, if I find that I need some form of stillness in order to find that answer, instead of being in that busyness and trying to react from that place, then I take a step back. I usually put my face mask on, the one that we make. It's like a 3D face mask that black out all the light. And one of the main principles for me is, in this world of motion, our senses are continuously being stimulated, and we start operating from a physical existence and from a reactive place. And in order to overcome that, the one thing that I like to do is continuously, how can I decrease the amount of information that is flowing through my senses so that I can find stillness in my core and then operate from that place of stillness and from that place of inspiration. So my team is always very puzzled about the way I respond to those situations, because for them it's like, Roudy, like, aren't you gonna do something about it now? Like, come on. And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go meditate for 45 minutes and we'll talk after. And if anybody listening could only challenge themselves at least once to respond from that place instead of reacting to the situation right away, perhaps you will realize that there's something within you that is waiting for recognition, that has the answer for everything. But we oftentimes don't listen to that voice because of the busyness that is happening all around us.
I couldn't agree more. I'm also thinking about, like, when you say it's almost like you're taking a timeout. And like, as parents, you'd give kids a timeout when they were, quote, like, misbehaving or doing something. I mean, at the end of the day, probably that's the parents that needed to take the timeout, but it's almost like this meditation is akin to like a timeout, right? Like, you're removing yourself from the situation, you're removing yourself from the stimuli, and just hopefully sitting there with your thoughts and reflecting and going inward.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I truly love this question, because you asked, if you had different conditions and circumstances, how would you live your life? And in the past, I would have probably said, I would have done this and that. And that's like 7 or 8 years ago. Back then, I was still living in a paradigm thinking that my conditions and circumstances control my reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I could only change my conditions and circumstances, that I could change myself. But today I truly believe something tremendously different. And that came from experience, because I realized that conditions and circumstances are the effects of causes, and cause only rely within myself. So by changing the way I think, by changing the way I'm feeling in this moment, and by changing the way I'm acting now, then everything around me from conditions and circumstances will shape itself to the change I'm making within myself. And that's exactly why when you ask me this question, I'm like, yeah, I think I'll do exactly the same thing I'm doing right now. And that's continuously evolving for sure. Tomorrow you may ask me, and I may tap into something new that is nourishing to me and to my ability to show up in the day, and that continuously evolve. But I by no means today think like there's anything outside of me that if I get that, I will be able to unlock things that I don't have at the moment.
I love that. And I think I would love to change gears a little bit and talk about light and its impacts on our health, which I know we talked a lot about in episode 213. But if we could just kind of go over quickly, because we have a lot we want to talk about today, some of the common misconceptions about light exposure and how that can impact our health.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we speak about light, most people think of light as something superficial that makes vision possible. The way I like to define light, I think light is the language that is spoken by every living thing on Earth, from the smallest bacteria to the largest mammals. And it has shaped life for billions of years, guiding the growth of the plants, the movement of the animals, and the daily and seasonal rhythm. So in a way, light is the language that nature speaks and whispers to us, shaping and molding every aspect of our biology. So one misconception, light is not just illumination. Light is information. And just like the information that we allow into our minds can either trap us in fear or empower us, light also is a double-edged sword. It can either elevate us or really make us sick. And this really starts on a cellular level. And I don't know about this. I'm gonna use the term "it has been said" because I have no certainty about that statement. But it has been said that 1.5 billion years ago, life began as a single-celled organism called bacteria that was thriving in darkness in the ocean. And it wasn't until certain bacteria made their way up to the surface and began absorbing sunlight that this new unfolding life cycle took a massive leap forward. And one bacteria engulfed another. And this partnership led to the development of mitochondria. We all know that mitochondria are those little tiny engines within every cell that fuel everything that we do, from thinking, creating, sleeping, moving. And essentially, there's a scientist, his name is Dr. Douglas Wallace. He won an award discovering that 90% or more of modern chronic diseases originate from the mitochondria losing their efficiency. And one big reason they lose their efficiency is lack of sunlight. Now, this is tied to your question about misconception about light. Most people think about sunlight as something bad that could hurt their eyes or that could burn their skin. However, the data and the science is there. There's a biochemist under the name of Albert Szent-Györgyi. He discovered that sunlight excites the electron in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria and generate the electricity that the mitochondria need to metabolize food into energy. Now, one big question I like to ask people, how much energy you think come from food? And oftentimes the answer is, 100% of the energy I have come from food. Now, it's scientifically known that, in fact, 1/3 of that come from food. So 30% come from food, 70% come from the light. And that's essentially tied to the photoelectric effect by Albert Einstein, which he described clearly how when light shines on metal, it excites the electron in that metal, and it generates electricity. And that's essentially how plants operate through photosynthesis, or how we charge a solar panel. But here's the beautiful part. Inside of plants, we have chlorophylls. And within a chlorophyll, we have a magnesium atom with 12 different electrons. Now, chlorophylls have a very similar structure to hemoglobin in us humans, which drive oxygen to our blood. And at the core of the hemoglobin, we have an iron atom with 26 different electrons. Now, having almost more than double the amount of electrons than plants means that we as humans, we are designed to interact with sunlight at an even more profound level than plants do, given that we have a lot more electrons than plants do. So one of the big misconceptions there is sunlight really causes cancer or causes cataract. Now, how could it be possible that the source of information and nourishment for all biological living beings on Earth is something that causes us cancer or cataract or any of those unbalanced effects? And the answer there, is it actually sunlight that is causing cancer, or is it artificial light exposure, which we could trace back to the late 1800s, beginning of 1900s? And you could look at the data and you'll see that skin cancer start ramping up ever since we started shifting from an outdoor living to an indoor living under artificial lighting.
Can I interrupt you and ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So I have pretty fair skin, if you can tell. And I would say that, I love the sun, by the way. Like, it feels so good. And that clearly there's a reason why, right? Like, we're getting energy from the sun. I love it. But if I am not careful, I can sizzle in the sun, especially if I go somewhere where the sun is really strong. Like right now I'm in Minnesota, I can handle the summers here and be okay. But if I go to Mexico, I could fry to the point where I'm blistering. So, and then you hear, well, if you get those kinds of burns, that can cause cancer. So I'm just curious, like what you think about, people with different types of like melatonin in their, or is that the right word? Melatonin?
Melanin.
What is it?
Melanin.
I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Melatonin. Melanin in their skin.
Yeah, that's an absolutely amazing question. And you are exactly right, because overexposure to sunlight without setting up the space for yourself and setting yourself up to be able to absorb that sunlight will actually cause cancer. Because for oftentimes people are living up north, a very indoor existence. They're indoors all the time, exposed to artificial lighting. And their skin is not prepared to absorb high intensity of sunlight. And then they fly down to Mexico. And of course, there's a massive difference in UV index between Mexico and up north during the winter time. And suddenly, these people start going outside, often very late, around 11 or 10, and then they fry themselves until 2 or 3 p.m., and then they go back home. Now, where's the missing link over there? Number one, they haven't prepared and preloaded their skin with early morning sunlight, which is very rich in the red and infrared. And that's the exact polar opposite of UV light. And this light often prepare your skin to absorb more sunlight without burning. Also, you get access to a lot of red, orange, and infrared later as the sun is setting, which is designed to actually repair any cellular damage that might have happened due to overexposure to UV light during the day. But if you think about it, most people are missing those two periods of time, early morning sunlight and later as the sun is setting. So that's number one. Number two, in nature, if we were to be living an outdoor existence, we have 4 different seasons. And during the spring, the UV light index will start slowly rising every day. And if we were to be outside exposing our eyes and our skin, that's a very important time so that we can start building our solar callus, which means preparing our skin to be able to absorb high UV index in the summer without burning. So putting ourselves out there suddenly in high UV index without the preparation could be extremely dangerous. It's like cranking up the heat while you're cooking a meal suddenly, and you end up burning that meal. The idea there is that we want to crank up that heat slowly and strategically so that we allow the skin to adapt, and we can start building our melanin, which is not only the compound that allow us to absorb sunlight without burning and that allow us to tan, but also melanin has a lot of different implications when it comes to health. It has been shown that the higher your melanin level, the more resilient you are to mold, parasite, and infections. Also, one thing about melanin is the darkest substance in this universe, which means that it absorbs all frequencies of light. And this absorption of light is not limited to the idea that it's filtering out the excessive UV light so that we don't burn. It turns out that when melanin absorbs UV light, it causes like a chemical reaction underneath the skin, breaking down the water molecules so that we can start producing hydrogen water in the cells. And one thing that I actually do, I buy relatively cheaply here in Mexico octopus ink, which is actually melanin.
Wait, say it again.
Octopus?
It's octopus ink.
Like octopus, like the creature?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the ink,
Okay.
the ink, the black ink from octopus is melanin. And I add the octopus ink to my water, and I put my water in the sun, and I create like vortexes in it. And what you will start seeing right away with your naked eye is like little bubbles forming in the water. That's actually hydrogen that is forming in the water, and that happens naturally in our bodies when we are exposed to the right amount of sunlight at the right time of the day.
Okay, wow. So much to unpack, and we could probably spend the whole time talking about like melanin and sunlight exposure. But I think what you're saying, Roudy, it's like you have to build up, like because historically, like ancestrally, all of our ancestors spent a lot more time outside. We are now spending most of our time indoors. Even Marnie and myself, who are really into being outside, it's just not happening for 80% of our day, right? So we have to be careful when we go away on vacation for that week or two when our skin has not been exposed. But it's like training for a race. Like you don't just like, sign up for a marathon and run one tomorrow. You're probably going to get injured. So you're probably going to get burned, same thing. So little ways that we can build up our exposure over time, even in the winter months, getting outside is really important. And, but can we dive in a little bit, like just pivot from there? Although I'm super curious about this octopus water and want to ask you about that, or this octopus ink that goes in your water. And is that similar to hydrogen water then? Like if you were to have
like
hydrogen
we have
water,
the bottles. We have the hydrogen bottles where you like push the button and it swirls it and it makes the bubbles and the whole thing. Is
that doing something similar? And how is that helping your melanin also, or no?
Yeah. So essentially, when you think about hydrogen water and how it's formed, the most ultimate way to make intracellular hydrogen water is by being out in sunlight and building your melanin. And the more melanin you have, and the more effective your body becomes at absorbing light through melanin, the more you're gonna maintain a high level of hydrogen water within your body without even, taking it as an external form on the outside.
Okay. So maybe we can pivot a little bit. Maybe it's just because Marnie and I were recording this and it's in the winter and we're not getting a lot of sunlight. And there's people out there that are like, oh, well, I'm getting sunlight. Like I can see it through my window. Well, that's not right. Maybe you can just touch on that a little bit. Like the difference between like artificial light and natural light. And then what are your thoughts on sun lamps? Because that's come up now for me twice very recently with people like, oh, well, I'm going to buy a sun lamp. And that will help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very cool question. What I want to highlight is the generic advice of, like, let's say wearing cheap blue blocking glasses during the day, or avoiding screens 1 hour before bedtime, or simply getting a sun lamp and putting it on your next to your office doesn't really work. And that's because the mitochondria rely on a very specific sequence of light information coming from nature. And think of it as a code that unlocks the door to activating your endocrine system and your circadian system properly. And it's like nature is continuously playing a symphony for all biological organisms to stay synchronized with their environment and with the universe. And when we ourselves miss the notes, or when we alienate ourselves from that symphony, we literally make ourselves sick. And that's literally because inside each of us, we have trillions of mitochondria. And each mitochondria has an internal clock sitting in front of it, all of which are connected to one central clock in the brain called the circadian clock. And think of the circadian clock as the conductor of a musical symphony. Just like the conductor of a musical symphony reads the musical notes and instructs the musicians on what to do, this circadian clock is reading signals of light and darkness and instructing all of our glands and organs on how to synchronize together and produce harmonious music. Now, what do I mean by harmonious music? When the body is secreting the right hormone at the right time, we experience it as optimal health and well-being. But when the body is secreting the wrong hormones at the wrong time, or when it's missing the opportunity to secrete the right hormone at the right time, it creates absolute chaos in the form of chronic disease. So essentially, this clock is also controlling when we go to sleep, when we wake up, how good we sleep, how rested we feel when we wake up. It also controls which mood we are in, how much energy we have, and how much we can get done. So all of this is tied to our light exposure, because the circadian clock is relying on primarily two main signals to stay in touch and to keep the internal communication happening. And number one is like sunlight first thing in the morning and periodically throughout the day. That's often very missed. Most people think, oh, I'm going to get my morning sunlight for 10 minutes first thing in the morning and I'm all set. This is not.
So I have a question about that. Like, I'm thinking about this morning, right? So I woke up really early this morning. It was pitch black outside. It's freezing here. I'll add that. And snowy. And I worked out indoors, not my preferred mode, but that's what I was working with this morning. And I watched the sunrise where I'm working out. I can see the sun rising, but I'm inside, but I saw the sunrise. It got light outside. You know, I did not go outside. I'm here. I'm on with my day. I'm in front of a window right now. There's lots of light coming in, not directly on me, but I see lots of light. You know, then midday, I will go outside. I'll spend a good solid hour walking outside. And then, you know, eventually I'll probably see the sun set because I can see it out my kitchen window, the sun setting. Is that enough?
I would definitely prioritize being outside when the sun is rising. anytime you are inside and you're seeing the sunrise behind windows, you're literally missing on so many different frequencies that are absolutely essential for your biology that are being filtered out by that window. Also, if you measure the lux, which is the amount of light that is arriving at the level of the eye, when you are indoors versus when you are outdoors, anytime you're behind windows, you're getting 50 to 100 times less amount of photons landing in your eyes and at your skin. So that's like a tremendous amount of light that is being eliminated just by being behind windows. The second thing, given the fact that it's winter time and you're up north, I truly think that by not being outside, you're also missing on the tremendous importance of cold exposure, which, if you think about it, sunlight is an absolutely essential driver for, let's say, neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. But also, cold does the same thing. And it's nature's way to compensate for that scarcity of sunlight. Because when sunlight is not there, oftentimes we are in environments where it's much colder. And it turns out that cold can do the exact same thing that sunlight does. For instance, cold raises your dopamine. It helps you optimize your metabolism and increases fat burning. Also, it turns out that somehow cold exposure helps you build your melanin. And that explains why the Eskimos up north have a darker skin. And
that's so interesting.
A lot of the benefits that we get from melanin through sunlight exposure gets activated during the winter when we are exposed to colder temperatures.
So I'm thinking about people in cold climates, like the reason why people gravitate towards these sun lamps. A lot of times people feel like more depressed in the morning, like their mood is low. And what you're saying is if you could find it in you, get good gear and get outside for even 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, I know ideally it's like 15, I've heard, minutes, but let's face it, like maybe it's 5 to 10 minutes of sun exposure that can really like activate, turn on, get the symphony working so that your hormones are secreting, in balance and properly, and maybe your mood would improve, right?
Absolutely. So if you ask yourself, what's the common thing between cold exposure, sunlight, and exercising? The three of them increase your core body temperature, leading you to be in a state where you're generating your own infrared light, which actually structure the water within your cells, and it produces what we call easy water, exclusive zone water. And anytime you're producing exclusive zone water, it's causing the respiratory protein in the mitochondria to move closer together and making the electron transport chain a lot more efficient, increasing energy production. So this is something that happens essentially when you are in cold water. Why? Because when you are in cold water, your body is producing its own infrared light or infrared heat so that it keeps your core warm. And it's essentially the same thing that happens when you are in sunlight, absorbing infrared light. Also, it's the same thing that happens when you exercise. So there's a lot of common things between exercising, sun exposure, and cold exposure. Another one is the three of them raise dopamine by 200% or more. Beta endorphin is a biochemical that is raised when you exercise, when you are out in the cold, and when you are out in sunlight. Fat burning mechanisms are activated when you are in sunlight, when you are in cold, and when you are exercising. So anybody who's living up north, what I'd recommend is during the winter time, sunlight is a lot more scarce, and most of us start feeling it. We feel lower on energy. We lack having the motivation. Our mood seems pretty low. And a very easy way to overcome all of that is make the effort to exercise outside first thing in the morning. And that will make your cold exposure even easier, because when you are moving, when you are running, you're already generating your own infrared heat, and it's not going to make that cold exposure really torturing.
Yeah.
And if you're outside, you're still getting a ton of light, even when it seems overcast, even when it seems very dark. Literally, if you have a mirror and you measure, the amount of light that you're getting on an overcast day is probably 10 to 15 times more than what you get if you were to be outside in a pre-lit artificial room.
Wow.
Okay. And I do love the idea of moving in the morning. That's how I tend to get my morning light, is I have to go on a walk first thing, if possible. I'm not great about it this time of year, but I do it. And it is much better. You're moving and it doesn't seem so uncomfortable and unbearable.
Well, and my husband and we've gotten in the habit of going on an evening walk. So we'll go on a walk in the dark after dinner almost every night. I'll like put snow pants on, which I guess I'm not getting my cold exposure because I'm keeping myself warm. But that's the way that I feel like I can actually get myself out there in the dark. And maybe that's not doing anything for my light. I don't know. But I feel like it is telling my body that it's time to go to sleep soon.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's not only about light, it's equally about darkness. And we spoke about the circadian rhythm, that central clock in the brain that resets all of the billions of other clocks. And we talked about how it relies on two main signals: sunlight first thing in the morning and periodically throughout the day. But also, guess what's the other signal that almost 99% of people in the modern world are continuously missing?
Darkness.
And that is darkness at a consistent time every day after the sunset. And I'm going to highlight the word consistent time every day after the sunset. This is not only like darkness that you're getting in your bedroom when you make it pitch black. It's that signal of darkness telling your brain that the day is ending at a certain at a specific time of the day when the sun is setting. This is because the absence of blue and green light in nature triggered the production of the very powerful hormone melatonin, which most people are familiar with melatonin as the hormone that will allow us to go to bed and have a restful night's sleep. But it's also the highest antioxidant in nature. And it's a very powerful messenger that activates the cellular cleaning crew, autophagy, mitophagy, and apoptosis. In fact, every night when we sleep, 50 to 70 billion cells die through a process called apoptosis. And here's the beautiful thing. For every cell that dies, a new, healthier one is supposed to be reborn. And this is how we're supposed to naturally continue to revitalize ourselves and live a healthy life. And it's very important to understand the significance of this cellular cleaning crew. And I like to use the analogy of a house. If you're living in a beautiful house and you forget to take the trash out, at first you wouldn't notice. But then day after day, this trash will start piling up and your house will become extremely toxic and unlivable. And this is exactly what happens on a cellular level in our mitochondria when we are missing sunlight first thing in the morning and periodically throughout the day, and when we are continuously missing that consistent signal of darkness after the sunset because of artificial light exposure. The body will no longer be able to run the cellular cleaning crew, and we start feeling it in different ways: brain fog, low energy levels, disrupted sleep, etc. But the beautiful news is that the body is supposed to replace 5 to 20% of its mitochondria and high metabolic organs like the brain, the eyes, the gut, the lung. And this literally means that your body could replace all of its mitochondria and those high metabolic organs in just under 3 weeks.
That's crazy.
Absolutely. And if you go back to my story, to me living on the farm and experiencing this very powerful transformation, what I just said right now explains the transformation that I felt in just under 1 week, which in contrast to around 20 years of really suffering and not knowing what to do. And it wasn't until I I solve my light problem and I start getting more sunlight first thing in the morning, sunlight periodically throughout the day, and then consistently getting that signal of darkness in my eye, which allowed my body to reset itself and activated the cellular cleaning crew, allowing my cells to clean themselves on the inside and to get rid of the old and replace it with new, that I was able to renew myself and regenerate.
So basically, like, understanding light helped you reclaim your vitality.
Absolutely. Understanding light not only helped me reclaim my vitality, but helped me reclaim my connection to nature and to my environment. And what I find that this relationship and this connection is continuously shifting and changing depending on which environment I'm in. Am I in Mexico, where there's high UV index all year long, and when the sun is rising at 6 and setting at 6? Or am I up in northern Quebec, for instance, in the winter, when the sun is rising at 10 and setting at 3? And what I found is there's no right or wrong environment. However, my behavior and my habits will really shift and will really depend on when the sun is rising, when the sun is setting, what temperature is outside. And that will allow my body also to not only know the time of the day, but also the time of the season, and shift from a summer metabolism to a winter metabolism, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I love this connection, like how light reconnects us back with nature, and then also like our own purpose. Because I do feel people are very disconnected from their soul and their purpose and experiencing joy. So how can people start to like restore that connection? Obviously getting more sunlight sounds like was a prime reason, but just starting small, just appreciating that many people are so disconnected.
And can we add to that people that don't live in Mexico?
Yes.
Because I feel like not most, but many listeners deal with winter.
And also, yeah. I mean, not just even not even the weather so much, but like they may have kids and families and a job where like they don't have the flexibility to like work outside or do different things, right? Like kind of taking some baby steps here before they permanently relocate to Mexico. But
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily advise anybody to relocate to Mexico, because if we were all like every part of the earth has its own magic and has its own gifts. Mm-hmm. And in fact, for instance, when you are living up north during the winter, the magnetic field of the earth is tremendously higher than the magnetic field that we get in Mexico. And what do we know about? What
does that translate? Like, yeah. How does that benefit?
That translates into a better electron transport chain. So we spoke about the mitochondria, and we said how it fuels everything that we do: thinking, creating, moving. And one way the mitochondria creates energy is by breaking down all the food that we eat into electrons and protons and driving those electrons in the electron transport chain to produce what we call ATP, and what we're learning, a form of water called deuterium-depleted water, which is intracellular water that is very different than the water that we get from tap. It's also from tap water. It's also known as easy water, exclusive zone water. And it's a form of water that actually interacts with light, because when light shines on this water, it creates a split in the water molecule, separating the negative and the positive. Now, I'd like you to visualize, the plug where you charge your iPhone. What makes it charge your iPhone is because you have the negative and the positive that you're plugging into, and that creates an electric charge. So essentially, this is exactly what's happening within our mitochondria when we are exposed to sunlight. However, the very good news is not only sunlight drives the electron transport chain, but also when we are connected to the earth and when we are walking barefoot on the earth. And in fact, the magnetic field works whether we are barefoot or not. So when we are in an area with higher magnetic field, what this is doing is it's optimizing our electron transport chain. So if you take a step back and you think about it, nature really has its own ways and has us covered, because when we are in Mexico, there's an abundance of UV light and sunlight, which optimizes the electron transport chain and our ability to produce electricity from light. However, during the winter, when there's scarcity of sunlight, what does nature do? There's cold, which also optimizes the electron transport chain and our ability to produce easy water in the intracellular water of the cell. And there's higher magnetic fields that also optimizes the electron transport chain and our ability to generate energy. However, the issue is what most people do living in Toronto, for instance, just let's take that as an example. They're living in high rises, right? Like in very high buildings. And the higher you are off the ground, the less the magnetic field of the earth is. And also most people are in regulated temperatures all the time and telling their skins that it's summertime Mexico all year long. But they're not getting that fluctuation of the magnetic field as well as the temperature fluctuation that is meant to activate that winter metabolism and optimizes the mitochondria and the ability of the body to produce easy water and optimizes its electron transport chain.
I mean, it's all like we have to get back to nature and the environment that we're in, and nature will take care of us and allow our cells to work effectively and the energy, and right. And so we have to embrace the environment. And so a lot of times we can complain about the cold and just crank up the heat and be inside and want to ignore it, or we can get out there and embrace winter. And I will say, I'm not from Minnesota. I moved here 14 years ago now. One of the biggest observations we had is that Minnesotans like really embrace the cold. They ice fish. They have huts that they keep outside, and they do that for like days on end, right? And there's the ice skating and the pond hockey and
plunge. I did a cold plunge in a lake a couple weeks ago. It was freezing.
Marnie and I have done it a few times
in the winter.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are opportunities for us to do that. We have to get uncomfortable a bit.
Yes. And the cool thing about it is it doesn't take so long for you to feel the benefits. You will instantly feel energized, motivated, and alive. You could literally go from a state of suicidal depression to a state of instant inspiration and connectedness to all things around, to everything around you. And that simply happens by reconnecting back to nature and re-exposing ourselves to those forces of physics that we're meant to be exposed to during that time of the season. Because we're driving ourselves crazy by keeping ourselves inside of boxes that are regulated in form of its regulated temperature, it's 6,500 kelvins of blue light, which is continuously telling our brain and our body that it's summertime, noon, all day long, all year long. And our body is not receiving the proper information to adapt to different times of the day and different time of the season.
So, we're all wearing the glasses right now that you sell and that we love, the Vivarays glasses. And I'm thinking about teenagers and adults, I guess, but in the darker months of winter, there's a lot of screen time that happens, between 5 p.m. and 1 a.m., specifically even for the teenagers. And I know people in my life that are like, well, I'm not going to stop watching Netflix, and I'm not going to stop going on my computer or looking at Instagram. So if they put on the glasses with the red lens, which I don't have in front of me at the moment because it's by my bed, but the red lens, do you think that will, even though ideally you're not on any screens at those times, is that going to give you some protection?
Yes, absolutely. So the goal of the glasses is to provide that circadian clock with the anchor point so that the brain knows that the day is ending. We already spoke and we said about how in nature, the absence of blue and green light is what triggered the production of melatonin and activate the cellular cleaning crew at night. And essentially, anytime we expose our eyes to that second sun coming from not only your screens, not only from your phones, but also from the light bulbs that you are using at home or down the streets or in the airports or in the hotels, we're literally disrupting the brain into thinking it's daytime again. And what this does, the body starts secreting cortisol, which is very helpful first thing in the morning when you get that morning sunlight, because it tells your brain the day it's starting. But after the sunset, it makes you more wired, anxious, and stimulated. And this, for example, explains why for so many years I lived like a night owl, and I thought to myself that I'm not a morning person. And I hear this all the time in our modern world. People identifying with night owl thinking, oh, I'm a night owl, I can't sleep before 12, and I'm not a morning person. But the truth is, I didn't have a night owl problem. I had a light problem. I was exposed to the wrong frequency of light at the wrong time of the day. And the exposure to this light, or the dangers of being exposed to this light, doesn't end just there. So essentially, the LED bulbs, they emit a narrow spike of blue light at 455 nanometer. And there's a lot of research showing how chronically being exposed specifically to this 455 nanometer blue light spike increases reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria. And that leads to inflammation, oxidative stress, and cellular damage. Also, we spoke about how sunlight builds up the easy water within our cells and causing the respiratory protein and the mitochondria to move closer together. Now, guess what? Blue light in isolation does exactly the opposite. It causes those respiratory proteins to move apart, and it literally decreases the efficiency of the electron transport chain, which eventually start leading to low energy level and metabolic issues. Also, another very interesting thing, we saw the exposure to this blue light chronically disrupts the natural flow of the mitochondria, which is meant to divide and then unite, fuse back together to continue to regenerate. And what research has shown is that when we're exposed to this 455 nanometer frequency from LED lights and screens, the mitochondria continue to divide, but then they fail to fuse back together. And that literally destroys the mitochondria and makes them older. And according to Dr. Douglas Wallace, 90% of modern chronic diseases are linked to mitochondria losing their efficiency. So I hope you can start connecting the dots about how sunlight empower us and empower our mitochondria, and how darkness is meant to regenerate our bodies. And when we are continuously missing that signal of darkness and replacing it with scrolling on our phones, being exposed to all these artificial lights, we're destroying our natural capacity for the body to regenerate and heal itself. And essentially what these glasses are doing, they are a tool to help us mitigate those effects and to get more of a balanced light into our eyes during the day. And at night, it helps us to eliminate the frequencies that confuse our clocks about the time of the day. So the glasses that all of us are wearing right now, we call them the blue light harmonizers. And those are essentially designed to decrease the sharpness of this inflammatory frequency that I spoke about. And instead of getting blue light in isolation, which we've never been exposed to blue light in isolation in nature, we're now decreasing the sharpness of that blue light and spreading it across the spectrum. So we're getting that blue light with its polar opposite. We start getting more of the yellow, green, orange, and red light, which in nature, these colors are designed to come symbiotically with blue light to balance it out. Because in nature, blue light is degenerative, but this doesn't mean that the blue light in nature is bad for us. Why? Because we never get blue light in isolation. The degenerative effects of blue light are balanced with the regenerative effects of the polar opposite of blue light. And that's the goal of the daytime glasses. Whereas after the sunset, supposedly now you're inspired and you're starting to go watching the sunset every single evening. The issue is that when you come back home, you're exposed to that second sun, and it's going to throw your rhythm again, and it's going to cause you to secrete cortisol at the wrong time of the day and sabotages the cellular cleaning crew. So in order to avoid this, the evening lenses, which you can clip on seamlessly onto the base frame, are designed to filter out the blue light, 100% of it, and they strategically filter out a part of the green light to mimic the exact color temperature of the bonfire. And that tells the brain that the day is ending, because evolutionarily, this is the light that we've been exposed to for thousands of years. And this is a very important signal to the body, because only then the body could start preparing for a restful night's sleep. And then 1 hour before bedtime, putting the nighttime lenses, which eliminate all blue, also 100% of the green, and they decrease the brightness by 15 times, all of which are very important signalings to the brain so that we know it's completely dark outside. Which, guess what? We're telling the brain the truth, but our technology is not.
Well, and these glasses are amazing, because it's like we all live in the modern world, and they're really helping us go from modern world living to how we evolved with rising and, going to sleep with the sun, which is just not possible for most people. And these glasses allow you to do that with getting the sun exposure throughout the day, like balancing both of those together. So we love it. Marnie and I both have been using these every single day since we met you back in October of 23 at the conference. So I know, Roudy, we could just talk to you all day. But we do want you to talk a little bit about this app that I believe your friend developed, and how it can help people kind of reset their circadian rhythm and just give them information, like, on their phone, to help them with some of these habits that we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think of the app as your personal circadian coach, because initially when you start learning about those things, you probably feel inspired after you hear this podcast, but within a matter of few days, life will get very busy, and you will tend to forget.
Yep.
So I find the app really helpful, because it's a reminder in your pocket that tells you when to go outside and when to avoid artificial light. So essentially throughout the day, there are specific windows of time that are absolutely necessary to be outside to harness the power of light. And one of those windows is morning sunlight, but there's also the time when UVA rises. And then there's the time when UVB rises. UVB is what allows us to make vitamin D, but the implication of UVB goes way beyond vitamin D. It increases nitric oxide production. It makes the heart more efficient. It increases blood circulation into our organs and enhances healing. It also increases libido. So the different frequencies of light have tremendous amounts of different benefits. And in fact, we have thousands of different enzymes in our bodies. And there's research dating back to 1980s by scientists called Berezin and Martinek, I believe, both scientists. They published studies showing how different frequencies of light can activate enzymes that speed up metabolism, digestion, and cellular repair up, and to make them up to 500% more effective. So imagine that, becoming 500% more effective at producing energy, at metabolizing food, and at absorbing nutrients from anything that you're taking, whether it's supplements or food that you're eating. So that's massive, right? And and there's no one frequency of light that is more important than the other. Just like we need the full spectrum of vitamins and minerals in order to live like a healthy life, we also need the full spectrum of sunlight in order to properly metabolize life and food and everything else. So the app will literally give you reminders to go outside on during specific windows of time where you'll make sure to absorb all of these different important frequencies. And also after the sunset, it will give you a reminder to wear your blue blockers, to avoid overhead lighting. That's a very, very important time to not only avoid overhead lighting and wear your blue blockers, but you could set up your space with candles or Himalayan salt lamps and positioning the light lower on the floor, which will it will have much less negative impact on your circadian biology compared to any light that is coming from overhead.
Super interesting. And we'll link this app up in the show notes so that people can go check it out. I definitely want to try it out because I think having those reminders would be huge, because even though I think about it mostly in the morning and in the evening, it maybe just would give me that little push I need to get outside instead of, so just thinking about getting outside. So I couldn't even just like jump outside for 5 minutes and watch the sunrise. I have to actually do the workout outside.
Well, baby steps, Marnie. Just start small. I mean,
it's hard when it's cold and it's dark to get outside.
I find though that it becomes a little bit addictive. Like
in the night, I like it. It's the morning that's hard.
Last week in the morning, I woke up craving and outside, and it was cold. It was like 20 degrees or something. I felt amazing after. I was starting to get a little bit sick, and I literally woke up. My body was so warm, and I was craving the outside. I like skipped going inside the gym on a treadmill, and it felt so good. It was like 45, 50 minutes. And that to me, I do feel like once you get outside, it's like, it's just the getting out part. It's just that initial, like, get your gear ready. So instead of just getting your workout clothes, Marnie, you got to add on your gloves, your hat, your snow pants, whatever else you need, ready the night before.
Yep.
Yes. And Marnie, this has to do a lot with your core body temperature, because when you first wake up, your core body temperature is still low, and it's actually wanting to start rising. So essentially, what you can do is you can start some jumping jacks inside, just like warm up, and then transition outside and continue your exercise session outside. And the reason why you don't feel that intensity in the evening is that during that time, your core body temperature is already up and is actually wanting to cool down.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So I know we have to start to wrap up this conversation. So how can people find you, connect with you, buy the glasses?
Yeah, so they can buy the glasses on our website, Vivarays, Vivarays.com. Also, we share a lot of education all of the time. And I think you could follow us on Instagram at Vivarays, where we share countless different education about different topics related to light and health. And you could also sign up to our email newsletter, where we share an educational blog every Thursday related to light and different health topics. If there's anything specifically that you'd like to learn about related to light, also reach out to us. Do let us know. And we take that in consideration, and we often create different content and blogs related to what people want to learn about.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And we have a code for everyone out there to buy your own pair of Vivaray light harmonizing glasses. And that's Living Well. And you have other products as well, but the glasses are the main one, right? And then Roudy, I know we asked you this question already once, but I'm wondering if you can answer it again. What does the art of living well mean to you today, right now?
In this very moment.
In this very moment. Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Yeah, the art of living is the art of tapping into the spirit of life and staying in tune with that spirit, regardless of what's happening on the outside, regardless of the harsh circumstances and conditions. Can you keep love in your heart amidst chaos and hatred? Can you continue to see things through the eyes of beauty when everything is ugly around you? And that to me is an art that I strive to continue to practice every day and improve my ability to stay in that, which is beauty, which is love, which is compassion amidst its polar opposite.
That is so beautiful. Wow. It's bringing tears to my eyes, actually, because it's just, the world is a little bit ugly right now, and that's just a beautiful way to think about things.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
it's helping. That's going to just inspire people regardless of what's going on in their life. You know, there are a lot of people with lots of different challenges, but to tap in to love and have compassion and just find a little bit of joy amidst the chaos. I do believe that could change, has the power to change the world, you know? So
The ripple effect.
Yes. Well, what an honor. It's just such a, honestly, a treat for us to be here with you. And you know what I'm going to do as soon as we get off this interview?
Go take a walk.
Absolutely. Because I did not do that this morning. I worked out inside.
This is exactly what I'm going to do as well.
Yeah.
I do have another podcast in an hour, but I'm definitely going to go for a run and get some UVB light.
Yeah. You know, it's almost how I'm thinking about this right now. It's recharging your phone battery. So instead of just
we're
plugging
like batteries
this in, well, we are, but we are energy, right? We talked about all that. I mean, you talked about mitochondria but we need to be recharged throughout the day. And sun is the way that we recharge right? Like food a little bit, like you said, but 70%.
70-30.
Yeah. So
yes.
Everyone go recharge your battery, not your phone. Who cares if that dies, right?
Don't even bring the phone, right?
No, don't bring the phone. I actually have stopped, really reduce the amount of stimuli I get on my phone when I'm walking, because I think it's powerful to just be outside.
Absolutely.
In nature with nothing.
Yes. Once you're out and once you're committed to that walk, just go fully in, you know, and you have all the time to come back and check out your phone later. That's the time for you to hear those whisperings that you will often miss amidst the chaos and the busyness.
So I'm curious, Have you heard of the 12-hour walk? The book?
No?
The challenge? You should look at. Marnie and I are kind of thinking we're going to commit to it in 2025.
I am committing to it. I'm not thinking about it.
Okay. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you go on a walk for 12 hours. You can have your phone with you, but take a video before and after, but you put it on airplane mode. For 12 hours, you walk undistracted.
Wow. Per day?
Well, just one time. You just pick a day and you leave your house and you just go.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much beauty in that, because it makes me think of things like the Camino de Santiago, or these pilgrimages where you're walking for several hours per day, and something about that is as you're walking, there's directionality to it, and almost a purpose of going from one spot to another. And I think it's such a beautiful way to not only exercise, but also, take the time to connect with yourself and be with yourself on that walk, and observe what is it that you're thinking about, how is it that you're feeling in that moment, and just be with that. Because oftentimes we're continuously shoving this under the rug because of so many things demanding our attention, and we're not really getting to pay attention to what's alive in us, what is it that we're thinking, what is it that we're feeling. And it's so funny, because I do notice that what we think and feel is what we become, and that's the thing that we're continuously not paying attention to. We're so busy looking at so many other things, whereas the things that are essential, which is our thinking and our feelings, we're continuously distracted from.
Yep. And that's why I think I'm so attracted to doing this, because spending 12 hours, when do I ever spend 12 uninterrupted hours with myself? Really never. So yeah. So it's going to be a good challenge.
Keep me posted.
Yes.
We
anyway, thank you so much. And
thanks, Roudy. Have a wonderful
have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me.